Hello everyone, this is Omercan and welcome back to PolyCosm. We are moving forward with our Nurbek project this week to create a rough in-game concept. Using the Nurbek model from last week, a couple of other models, and some basic geometry, Christina has created this rough plugin for reference. I will be using that to draw over some basic in-game elements and sketch out some rough ideas for a UI. I will also be exploring the potential color palette for this particular scene and the lighting scenario. By the end, we should have a rough concept to help us visualize how this scene will look within the game engine. Alright, let's get started. You can see the scene I'll be working with here, and of course it is created in Blender. To be able to get an accurate isometric camera angle, we have used the Create ISO Camera add-on for Blender. It comes with a few different preset isometric camera angles, and all you have to do is pick the one that serves your purposes the best. You can create the wireframing around the geometry by subdividing it, and make sure to get a viewport render so you can keep your grid. I would also recommend hiding everything in the scene except for your grid, and getting a render of that as well. That way, you can have that over your scene in Photoshop as a separate layer. With the help of the grid, I can make sure everything fits the isometric perspective as I'm sketching. I should note that when you're working on something like this, you will have to make sure your perspective lines are all parallel. What that means is no vanishing points. This can be very tricky to get your head around if, like me, you're used to drawing in perspective all the time, but it is crucial to remember that in isometric views like this, we have to forget about perspective as we know it. I want the scene to give us an idea on how a regular moment in this game might look like. The environment here plays an important role to communicate the overall mood of this game, but we also have to keep in mind that it shouldn't be too distracting. The main character, Nurbek, and the caravan he is leading are the important elements. The rocks, the trees, and all the other assets around are going to be there for mostly flavor. Of course, all these elements would have to be designed more in depth later on during production, but right now, I'm trying to come up with their designs on the go to get the scene done quickly. Speaking of speed and efficiency, don't be afraid to copy-paste stuff around if you have to. The same tree asset would probably be reused in the game anyway, so you don't have to individually draw different trees every time. I'm using the base caravan model as reference to design something that looks like it fits this environment better. I wanted to have more of a personality, but also not distract too much from Nurbek himself. Right now, it is more of a placeholder. Like I said before, this would have to be designed specifically later on, and the way it looks for the final product might differ completely. That is the essential thing to remember with concept art. Everything you draw and create is a part of the process. It's better not to get attached to your designs too much. I'm not really a UI designer. I mean, you'll probably be able to tell later on that I definitely am not. But sometimes as a concept artist, you might get asked to sketch out some rough ideas for UI placement. Much like everything else, these are also just temporary placeholders to give us an idea on how the UI might be placed to frame the overall look. If this was for a real game, these elements would be subject to change as the game mechanics evolve throughout the production. Okay, I'm happy with the rough sketch, so moving on to the cleaner Lineart stage just now. If we were really short on time, and let's say our imaginary art director needed something right away, we could have skipped the stage and went into blocking in some quick colors right away. But I do have time, and I wanted this concept to look a little tidier and cleaner. This also gives me the opportunity to indicate some texture and give things more of a personality. But when it comes to Nurbek, I'm not going to detail him too much, as we already know what he looks like quite well. I mean, you guys have seen him without his clothes on in the previous video. Yeah, you should be all ashamed of yourselves. Right, let's start dropping in some color. With the initial Nurbek concept, I have indicated a rough color palette for the overall mood and his environment, so I'm staying close to that as I'm working color into my drawing. As you can see, it is very rough and I'm just coloring stuff sorta randomly. I don't want to spend time on, let's say, finding the perfect color for a tree and try to block it in perfectly, because it is all subject to change at this stage. I'm looking for an overall harmony, and you are going to see me change stuff around a lot as I'm working on this. As for Nurbek, we already have an established color palette for him, so all we have to do is color pick from the initial concept. Now that I have my base colors down, it's time to get some fancy lighting going. Things always do start to look better at this stage. Nurbek's lantern is the main light source in this scene, and it is also an important gameplay element, so we are making sure that pops out more than anything else. I wanted the caravan to have its light source as well, but it's a lot dimmer than Nurbek's, therefore reinforcing the idea that the caravan driver needs Nurbek to lead the way. I'm adding some darker shadows to give more depth to the environment right now, and I'm also adding some color variation for extra visual interest. This is getting very close to being finished now. It's just about using the time that I have to make it look better to help me sell the idea. Since the scene itself is almost finished, I'm going to block in a very rough UI placement as well. Warning, it is not pretty at all, but that is sort of the point right now. We just need some placeholders to mostly help us figure out the composition and the possible overall color scheme for the UI elements. I wanted Nurbek's lovely face, his health bar, and his stamina bar to be clearly visible for the player. Over on the bottom right is where potential actions is placed. And I think top left is a good place to show his current quest. At this stage, it's all about thinking about similar games you have played before and imagining how this might play like. It's really exciting as you get closer to finishing the concept and you start to have a clearer vision for the potential end product. And after some tweaks and finishing touches, here's the final concept. We are not done with this, of course. This is just a quick concept piece to help us get to the next stage, which would be to bring this concept to life in 3D. We want the final proof of concept to be as close as it can get to a screenshot from this hypothetical game. You will have to wait until our next video in this series to be able to see that though. Unless, of course, you are watching this when that video is already out, so I guess you can just go and watch it now. Lucky you. Thanks for your time, everyone. Be sure to let us know what you think of our videos, or ask us any questions you might have in the comments below. We'll see you again next week. Stay safe and take care, everyone.